Hello and welcome to the show. Today I'm your host, Jack Canfield, and with me today is Jim North. Jim's an author, a public speaker, and a really great storyteller. And his leadership background and his degrees in writing and journalism, plus a Master of Professional Writing degree, have led him to writing a new book about the 12 essential virtues for an extraordinary life. And I'm really excited to have him here to talk about this, because I think this is something that is outside of our consciousness for most of us. So we really need to know to be living a life that's aligned with our highest values and aligned with the things that will give us more joy and fulfillment in life. So welcome to the show, Jim.
Thanks, Jack. It's a pleasure. And looking forward to it.
Yeah, me too. As I've gotten to know you and your work over the years, I'm excited about what you're sharing with people. And now you're writing a book about it. So let's start by what inspired you to decide to write a book about virtues?
Well, I just felt like that these have been themes that have influenced my life, that have helped me. I've thought of character virtues as I thought of the word diamonds today. I mean, there are things that are valuable and precious in your life. There are things that help you through trouble and difficulty, things like love and diligence, courage, faith, hope. And I just felt like these had a commonality to them. I almost think of them like a family, because when you put your best foot forward with one of those, somehow those are kind of connected and they sort of come along behind. They're like a little bit of an army for you, because we can't concentrate on everything at the same time. It does require some focus in the midst of an adversity. And we want to pull the best one out of the bag at the time. And I think they're unsung in many ways, because people look for help externally in their lives. Maybe my help will come from here. Maybe it will come from there. But somehow these things are inside of us, almost like sleeping giants.
I like that metaphor. You know, it's interesting. I remember a teacher I worked with many, many years ago who told me a story about one of his students. And his student was someone who, this teacher would teach these kids like aphorisms every day, you know, little sayings with wisdom in them. And then he would, when he call on them in their, for attendance, they couldn't answer with here. They'd have to say one of the aphorisms they had been memorizing, and one of the quotations. And one day the kid said, why do we have to do this? And he told him a story about how this man, there was these people were in a caravan, they're going across the desert. And this man came to them one night as they were sitting around their fire and said, gather as many stones as you can tonight and put them in your saddlebags. And so they did. Some people gathered a lot, some people gathered a little because it was a lot of work and they didn't see the reason for it. It was going to weigh down their camel. So they get to the next town, and when they open their saddlebags, all the stones had turned to gold. And so he said to them, you know, these quotes that I'm giving you are someday going to turn to gold for you and are going to make a difference in your life. And he went on to share about how this one student got in trouble, ended up in juvenile delinquent, detention, and remembered a phrase that he had learned in school. And he said, I practiced that phrase, and it's what got me to change my life. And so when you think about these as diamonds and things that are in your saddlebags, it's absolutely true. And most of us don't turn inside to recall those things because we're often not taught them. And so I'm really glad that you're doing this work. So, here, writing a book's not easy. And even teaching this stuff is not the easiest thing for people to do. What motivated you to do this, and who do you hope will read your book, and what do you hope they'll take away from it?
I thought by highlighting these kinds of character virtues that are at everyone's disposal, when we come to these crossroads every single day of our lives, I'm confronted with a choice. Am I going to go left? Am I going to go right? And the fact that, we share a common humanity, things that have helped me can help another person. I feel our world is full of people that in one way or another are hurting or have experienced brokenness in some way. It might be a job loss. It might be a family problem. It might be personal self-limiting beliefs that somehow these character virtues can burst those barriers for us. And I just think for me, it's been life-changing to get my eyes off of myself. So in other words, if I have some of these diamonds, they always say, fit a round peg in a round hole. Don't ever try to fit a round peg in a square hole. So if I think I have something that will help someone and I have a round peg, why, if they have a different kind of need than that, well, why would I try to mash that in there? That's not what they want. They're looking for something that fits. And I feel like these character virtues are so adaptable according to the need of that day, of that moment. So here's what I found, that I want to expand my field of view, like a camera. They talk about field of view with camera. How much can the camera take in? How much resolution does it have? Things like that. So I want to think of my life like that. In other words, if I'm always thinking about myself, that's a problem. It's a dead end street. So I want to really focus on, who can I be an unsung hero for? And when you use the word hero, usually people think of some great person on a pedestal, and that's really not the case, because I have found a hero is just a helper. And there's no single one of us that doesn't have people in their lives that have significantly contributed by offering love, by offering their hope, by offering courage to us when we need it. But it's more than that, because I want to look actually each day, who can I help? And I've found that if I will share and serve the best pieces of pie, I'll get to eat some of that myself. But if you don't deal out your best in life, do not expect the best. So you asked, who do I hope would read this book? And I hope that a person that's experiencing a crisis of any kind, like I mentioned, maybe family, maybe a job, maybe a severe financial problem, it takes some heroes to get off the mat and move forward, because we were not designed to fail. And so I just like this idea that these are character essentials that can help someone else. And it is best served if I'm really looking each day, who can I fit my round peg in a round hole? So I just feel that different kinds of people and different kinds of needs can benefit from this kind of a message.
That's great. Now, there are a lot of benefits to the character virtues you write about. And it just, I love you use the word character essentials. And it's kind of like, we need a heart, we need lungs, we need stomach, we need intestines. All those things have to work together for our life to work. And I'm thinking of all these character virtues as like that, and, let's talk about a couple of the virtues and maybe, unpack them a little bit for our viewers.
Sure. Some of the character heroes, helpers that are always at our disposal. I talk about faithfulness as a great connector, because it's really not what you start. Sure, it's important to start well, but we want to progress in that, and we want to finish that. And at the point we finish it is the point of fulfillment. So I talk about faithfulness. What does that mean? But when you're faithful, your employer can rely on you. That person right there, I can trust to take a job and see it through to the end. They're not going to quit in the middle. And if I could urge someone today that might be listening to us, is just to never leave things undone. Well, sometimes we do have to change our course and so forth, but we do that through just simple acknowledgement and communication. We pick up the pieces. But by and large, we want to be finishers. And I'm actually hoping to write a new book in the future called The Finishers, because I think it's a whole topic in itself. Let me give you another one, courage. I call that light in the dark. Now, I think of a young lady in her early 20s. She was a theater student. Unbelievable, riveting story. One of the most impressive young persons I've met, because she got in 2 devastating car crashes, both on Black Friday, 3 years apart. She didn't even know if she would live on either occasion. Now, here's the thing. She had this crash. She was ejected from the car. There were 3 other of her friends strewn across the road because a few of them were ejected. Now, she had the worst injuries of all. Her life shrunk down to moments. And here's the thing, we have to handle small moments with a magnificent view. It's interesting. She described laying in the cold. There was snow, just a light layer of snow on the street. And she picked up a little snow and she was looking at it and playing with it in her hand. And all she could think of, and she began to pray, and she asked God to not let her friends die. Now imagine that. What possessed her to be in that kind of condition? This was her second car crash. And she describes them both, and it's in my book and can be read about. But she asked God to help her friends live. And I thought that was one of the most remarkable things. So that's a pretty good example of courage. Another is friendship. Anyone that wants to fight through life's battles is going to do it with a friend. You don't always need a whole bunch, but you need one faithful one. And so I tell the story of Mr. Rogers. Who can think of a friend or a neighbor without thinking of Mr. Rogers? But I spoke with Hedda Sherapan, who worked with him 55 years. Wow. And was with him on the very first episode, and I think it was 1966. And she has so much to say about him. And of course, he's passed away, but his work lives on because she's continuing to do it. And so my conversation with her is in this book as well.
That's great. Well, I love the fact that you have some interviews in your book, as well as the stories that you tell and the character virtues that you talk about and the illustrations you give. And one thing about I like it is that you talk about people that illustrate the values and the character virtues that you're talking about. So it's easy to Velcro. Like sometimes things are too academic or philosophical, but when they have the stories associated with it or an experience or something you can do with it. I mean, I loved reading the chapters that I read. So I think you've done a really good job. So I just want to, unfortunately, we have to bring this to a close. Any final comments you want to make before we wrap it up?
No, I just appreciate the opportunity and the pleasure of talking with you. And I admire you greatly. And I'm thankful for the friendship.
Well, which we just talked about as a character virtue. So yeah, I think it's important that we all make friends and be a friend. And so I'm glad to have met you through this process. And I look forward to reading your book. I want to encourage everyone else to keep an eye out for it as well. This is something we should be reading to our children, getting into our schools, and it's going to make a big difference in the world. So thanks again for joining us today, Jim.
Thank you, Jack. It's a pleasure. Have a great day.
Oh, you too, my friend.
Okay.
And thanks to all of you who tuned in to watch today. And please make sure to tune in again next week when I'll be interviewing another transformational speaker and author who can help you live a happier, more successful, and more more fulfilling life. And until then, think about how you could put into action one of the virtuals that Jim talked about today in your life. What's one thing you might do either night before you go to bed or tomorrow? Because I always like to say that, you see books behind Jim and you see books behind me. You don't want to just have notes. You end up with shelf esteem. You want to be doing something where you can go out in the world and actually make it happen to increase the quality of your life. So thanks for joining us today, and we'll see you all again next week.